Okay, guys, long-lasting lettings and how to really cultivate that enduring tenant ties and have that good relationship with tenants. It's so important, Kerin. I'm sure you'll agree to have that
Definitely.
good relationship with tenants.
Yeah, obviously it's an investment, and having good tenants and a good landlord, it just makes things go nice and smoothly.
For any situation, whether we are the agent trying to manage the property, whether it's the landlord trying to have a good investment, it all boils down to relationships and having good relationships, and that ultimately makes for a long-lasting tenancy and has really good ties. Having really good ties with a tenant is such a big part of that. So, I mean, it costs you money whenever a tenant moves out, and that's the reality of it. From the loss of income when they do leave, and then you don't have the rental income for that period in between where you are searching for a new tenant and having them put in place. You've got then the upfront costs for things like wear and tear to rectify possibly in between. Then you've got new referencing fees for the new person, and this all makes for long-lasting lettings. These are all these long-lasting letting goals, but you need to do all these things in between. So the longer you have a tenancy running, the less likely you're going to have to do this more frequently. No one wants a lot of turnaround. And every landlord's dream is to rent a property to someone who treats it like their own, pays their rent on time, provides that uninterrupted income stream for several years at a time. However, that doesn't really happen by luck. That expectation is fine, but you need to do things in order to expect that. You can't just expect it to happen. And cultivating the high value forever tenant as such, it's all about a combination of having your property legally compliant, having that, implementing that personal diligence to, forge that really strong and mutually beneficial partnership between landlord and tenant, and landlord, tenant, and agent, of course. So to show you what that means in practice, we thought we would go through some useful tips this morning and share the way we foster long-lasting lettings for landlords. So let's take a look at a few things this morning, and we're going to kick off. We're going to look at seeing presentation as, a protection. Having that presentation as a protection, giving tenants that comfort and confidence, embracing maintenance as an investment and a big part of the investment, robust and respectful rent reviews, and high impact, low cost loyalty rewards. That's quite a good one. We'll round up on that today. The best single thing you can do to save unnecessary costs is to nurture long-term tenancies with high quality tenants. And our guide today is packed with actionable tips and achievable precisely and achieving precisely that. So Kerin, you can kick us off, and we'll look at that seeing presentation as protection. What do I mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we all know first impressions count. And it's the same with properties. You can have a listing that makes the property look great, but ultimately when you've got tenants coming in the door, that first impression is what they're getting of the property. So the move-in standard that you're setting not only establishes the level of care you expect and demand in a tenant, but also in return as well. So what you put out is effectively, hopefully, what you get back. So if you're putting out that good standard, it's set into a tenant, that's what you're expecting them to keep it like. And it also filters out the tenants as well, who will pay for a great home and a professional landlord.
Yeah, definitely.
So some of the most effective ways to attract them is a fresh and neutrally and crucially washable paint throughout. And it makes it easy for your tenant to maintain the decor. And if you've painted in the last few years, wash down the walls to revive them. So again, we see this time and time again, like maybe some people want to redecorate, but a lot of the time that tenants want to come into that nice neutral property that they can just put their furniture in and feel like they're at home. So making sure you've got good quality paint, as we say, washable, durable as well, and something quite neutral so it's easy enough for touch-ups. A lot of tenants want to put pictures up, maybe some shelves up. So having a paint that's easily enough to get another tin of so they can do touch-ups when they move out is key there as well.
You see, and when you mentioned there about keeping it neutral, and some people always just turn to straight away plain white, or it used to be magnolia. Don't do magnolia. Well, you can't, but it's but you do get like kind of neutral on-trend shades nowadays. Do you know, like this off-white colour, the dove kind of colour, possibly a light grey colour. And you also get those really like off-green colours and things. I mean, be careful, but you get they're quite on trend, but they're still neutral, and they will stand the test of time.
It can be quite hard with some shades. So again, if you're going for something that's a little bit of a slightly different colour, do a wee sample first in an area and then go and try and touch it up and see how it goes, because we have a landlord and they did the colour. It was a lovely colour that they went through the property. Very, like, it's still fairly neutral, but very on trend. Again, and it set a good standard for the tenant, and they attracted a good tenant because of it. But it's a family home, and when you're trying to do touch-ups in it, the paint doesn't touch up very well, unfortunately. So it's definitely erring on the side of caution. Although white can be a bit bland sometimes, it's still a safe bet to go with because it is neutral, it's easy to touch up. And again, if you just need to blitz the walls white after you've had a tenant in for a few years, it's easy to do as opposed to touch-ups. It's nice to see.
A lot of renovations where people are trying to keep it kind of trendy, but also neutral. So there is that. You could find that common ground, but don't get too carried away because, like you say, that's a prime example.
Yeah. And again, coming to other factors in the property is modern, durable and immaculate kitchens and bathrooms with high quality fittings and functions that'll last for a good multiple years are obviously key here. They can be deal breakers to tenants. Again, you could have a property that's all nearly done, it's freshly painted, you've got new flooring in it, but if you've got a dated kitchen or a dated bathroom, that's obviously going to pull down the standard of it. And again, not a lot of people, it's not something you can change either. A tenant can't just go in and be like, oh, redecorate the bathroom. If it's all tiled, it is what it is. There's not really much that they can do. So if your bathroom or kitchen's maybe seen better days, it could be time for even a facelift. You don't have to rip it out and completely redo it. There's aspects that you could maybe change, like new worktop or some new unit doors, just to freshen things up a bit over time.
Yeah, kind of like a wee mini refurbishment. It can go a long way and cost a fraction of the price.
And one of the most important ones is a professional deep clean. Nobody wants to be going into a dirty property. So before the handover, it sets an unstable benchmark for cleanliness. So making sure that your tenants are seeing the level that you're giving them, again, it sets that precedent for what you're expecting them to keep it like. And it makes it clear how you want your property back as well. It's not just even how much a tenant's looking after it during the tenancy, that's how you want it back. And if you've done things right, you should have an inventory, which will reflect if you've had it professionally cleaned. So again, that's the standard that the tenant should then be returning it in.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this the other day, and there's a few landlords and things that give us complete like anonymity just to kind of get on with things. And there was one where the tenant's been there quite a while, and we were like, right, definitely deep clean this, but I would get a sparkle clean before a tenant comes in. And I just think you need to set that standard.
And again, little snags as well eliminates teething issues at the start of the tenancy. So if you're in between tenancies, going in, making sure that things like there's no dripping taps, there's no loose door handles or hinges, ideally before viewings. But again, things like that can be done before the check-in is done for your inventory. And given firm times as well for completing any outstanding jobs to stay in touch. So again, if you've got some things that are not detrimental to the start of a tenancy, and your tenant's quite keen to get in, you could say to them, look, I'll get this done. So for example, like if you've got viewings going ahead and maybe the garden needs a bit of weeding done, you can highlight to people, look, although it's like this just now, it's going to get done before you move in, and setting that clear time scale, but making sure you stick to that time scale as well is important. There's no point in giving false promises because it's just sours the start of the tenancy.
That was something else that we were just discussing recently as well, that, you know, even though there's maybe small maintenance issues, or like you say, the gardens to be tidied or whatever, that's not something that I would say would stop viewings and things, but something that's not clean definitely is. You know, as long as it's clean and you can say, well, this is getting fixed and this is the grass will be cut, and that's fine. But to walk into somewhere that's not clean could be a big like off-put for people.
Yeah, and as I say, first impressions count. So you can say to somebody, look, that wall's getting painted, but again, if it's not clean, it's just people just feel uncomfortable in it. So it doesn't set a very good first example. And that impeccable presentation sends a very clear message, and a psychological one as well, for the condition to the tenants to maintain the property and that level that you're expecting from them as well. So making that initial investment can obviously pay off effectively to get you some premium tenant insurance there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and then that does bring us on to how you giving a tenant that sense of comfort and confidence in you as a landlord, and how the property is looked after, and you as an agent. Tenants are ultimately, they're the safeguarders of the property. So it's fair that they should feel comfortable in their home, because ultimately once they sign that tenancy agreement, it's their home, and they feel confident in its management, whether that's self-managed by the landlord or by an agent. They are confident that things will be done and things are taken care of in a certain way. And you need to set that tone straight off from the start, just as you expect them to behave respectfully and responsibly while they're in the property. It really is a two-way street, definitely. And from the initial paperwork to the ongoing, contact and communication, it's all relevant for that two-way communication and that two-way street. And make sure, we have a blog previously about setting up tenancies, and I was just going to say, make sure you set up your tenancy correctly. It's so important. We could do a whole show on it. We have done a whole show on it. I've put the link actually in the blog attached, and it's titled "Set Up Tenancy Correctly," and you could click through that, and it's like a hassle-free kind of blueprint of how to do that. It's really handy, because we could sidetrack and talk about that for a long time, setting up a tenancy properly. Click on that link and go through, and there's a lot of, it's a really comprehensive outlining, like the welcome pack, and manuals for appliances, and it's that real clear guide on how to set the tenancy up, set that tone for how your expectation of them for reporting maintenance issues, and what their responsibilities as a tenant is, and what yours is as the landlord. Keeps things really clear, and it just builds the foundations of a really good relationship. And from setting up the tenancy, and you could read more on that link, to the ongoing management, and that's things like the inspections, checking how well the tenant's settled in, to the subsequent visits for spotting problems early, which the inspections are, and highlight any seasonal chores, things like the weeding and sweeping up leaves and things like that, or having your tenant be aware that, keep an eye on your gutters in the winter months. Are they getting choked with leaves and things? Let us know, we'll get somebody to come out and clean them, because this could happen quite quickly and could cause a lot of maintenance issues. And again, that builds on maintaining that rapport and that relationship with your tenant, and they feel that you are very proactive in your responses and what you're doing, so they feel quite confident in the fact that, I'm going to bring this to you and bring this to your attention because I know you're going to deal with it, rather than they take like, oh, my landlord doesn't care, so I don't care. That's not the relationship you want. And also give your tenants the correct and legally required notice before coming out to a property, entering a property, or if you want to do an inspection, you want to have a look inside and things, you need to give your proper notice. And whether that's just for the routine inspections and check like repair issues and things, respect your tenant's space, and that also crucially builds good relationships. And if you have that good relationship, they will more than happily let you into the property, and there will be no issues there. And again, because you've built that foundation from the start and right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think tenants can be, especially with their first one, can be a bit apprehensive with inspections. But if you're going and doing them regularly, it gets to the point where effectively it should just be a bit of a catch up and just checking for those things that they might not have noticed if you are doing them consistently. And they know what to expect then as well. We have some tenants, and I've been rattling through inspections, and some of them haven't had one yet, and they're like, oh, I've been so anxious. And I'm like, there's nothing to be anxious about as long as you've not trashed the property.
Yeah.
It's a catch up with them as well, and just to make sure that everything's going smooth, and it's for their benefit as well as the landlord. So the landlord knows the property's being looked after, but also there may be some little things that the tenants have just not thought to report, like maybe a cupboard door's not shutting properly, or there's a door handle loose. It's just little things like that that gives them the opportunity that, we can address these minor things so they don't become major things. And again, checking things like the gutters aren't choked, especially at this time of the year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's quite clear that the long-lasting letting that everybody wants to achieve is far more likely when you've got tenants who enjoy their home life. They feel listened to by their agent or their landlord. and they know that they have a good management, and that's quite hard to find, and it's quite hard to. And do you know, we get a lot of tenants that come back to us, and we've had tenants that do you know, there were situations where landlords were selling and things, and they were looking for us to find them a property with us still, because they didn't want to go anywhere else, because they wanted to stay with us as a managing agent. That is a really good feedback, that tenants actually want to keep you as their agent rather than go somewhere else. If you're getting that kind of feedback as an agent, or if a landlord, do you know, if a landlord says, "Have you got another property I could move to so I could stay with you?" That, I would take that as a really good compliment to how you've managed the property and managed the tenancy and built a relationship with the tenant.
I'll get to a time as well where, you know, especially if you've got a few properties, how long you'll be spending with the tenants, like when you're doing inspections. I mean, you get some and you're in and out in 5-10 minutes. It's just, they're literally quite happy just to sit there while you do what you need to around the property. Or there's some that you go in and you're sitting on the couch having a catch up with them as well for it. So you get a bit of a feel for how long people are happy to spend with you. And it's a bit of company for some people as well, especially if you've got maybe an older tenant on their own. It's a nice catch up for them. So it is, and it's building that relationship as well. So you know, if something's coming up that maybe you are going to need access for a gas safety check, it's going to be easy enough to get it arranged, or you're wanting to go in for an inspection, or there's something wrong, you know, the tenant will come to you about it. So keeping that good relationship.
Yeah, and we keep falling back to obviously keeping on top of maintenance issues and things. And really, you're going to talk us about, you know, embracing maintenance, because it's such a big part of having such a successful investment. If you've got a property portfolio, or even just a couple of properties that are an investment for your retirement and things, you want them to be a successful investment. And maintenance is such a big part of that, because if you've got a property in good shape with a good, happy tenant, you will have a good investment. They go hand in hand. So yeah, run us through some of the maintenance issues and really embracing the maintenance side of things, Kerin.
Yeah, so some landlords view repairs as an expense to avoid, but maintenance is actually a solid investment. So it protects your property's value, secures a higher rent, and promotes a long-lasting letting. So obviously you're keeping tenants in if you've got a property that's less problematic and you're keeping on top of things. So acknowledging any issues that are raised by your tenants as soon as you can. The way you respond is often more important than how quick you actually get the problem fixed. So acknowledging to them, like, I've heard you, I'll get this arranged, can even be better than sometimes you could maybe be like, I'll go to the contractor and get it arranged, but you've not actually told your tenant that that's what they're doing. And if you've not told them that, they don't know.
Yeah.
So just that acknowledgement.
That, but the tenant doesn't know that.
Yeah. So just keeping them in the loop with it can make things a lot easier when you do have any maintenance issues coming up.
Yeah.
And again, using tried and tested tradespeople, it never, I mean, you pay cheap, you pay twice, basically. So going with these people for temporary fixes, you're just going to end up having to get somebody professional back out probably to sort it, and paying for it at least twice. So just getting somebody out that you know is reliable and that will do a good job. And you can even follow up with the tenant just to make sure that they're happy with the quality of work afterwards as well. So if there are any issues before you make payment, for example, you can nip it in the bud. And if they need to go back, you should have that recourse there as well.
Yeah.
High quality repairs prevent repeat problems, which is what we are looking for. They demonstrate professionalism and reduce your future costs.
Yeah, definitely. It's tried and tested I think is the key phrase there. And if you've got contractors that you've used and you know are reliable and do a good job, you know, they're the ones that you want to keep on your contractors list.
And remembering that nothing drives a tenant to leave more than poor maintenance in the property. So a problem never gets cheaper the longer you leave it, and repairs never improve on their own. So making sure that you're keeping on top of it is a way to keep your tenant happy and in place for a longer time.
Yeah, and like you say, the longer something's left, the more costly it probably ends up becoming. Definitely. So yeah, the maintenance side is such an important part of a successful investment, and that's something that a lot of potentially maybe new investors don't understand or don't realise yet, and think, and people sometimes do, especially when, you know, if costs involved, they try and shy away from it. But to do that can cost you a lot more further down the line. So definitely. Another important part of investment, and especially in today's, obviously, the way that the the way that the sector's governed now, and obviously the changes that have been implemented over the last couple of years, having that real robust and respectful rent review process in place is something that's really important, especially now, we're entering that realm of the rent cap in areas and things as well. So you really need to think about that and keep that your rents are in line with the market and not too low. And then you get to a point where we have areas that have got the rent cap in place, and then you're kind of stuck in that situation. We see a lot of that on the back of the pandemic, when they put rent freezes in place. People then were stuck with the rent levels that they had, which were sometimes quite low. And then interest rates, mortgage interest rates started to increase. And then that pushed a lot of people to end up selling because they couldn't put their rents up because of that. And then the costs just far outweighed what the affordability didn't work. And that's how a lot of people did end up selling up at that time. So every tenant does realise that rents do rise to meet the market, and they take into account for those increased costs, and they should do as a tenant nowadays. However, if it's clumsily handled, review can turn into a long-term tenant into a departing tenant overnight if it's not done correctly. And to make sure that you do that correctly and this kind of situation doesn't happen, have a kind of checklist for your rent review process. And first off, I would always say, always back up your proposed new rent with some concrete, up-to-date evidence for comparable local rental values. There's not any use in trying to value your rent and re-establish a new rent level when you've nothing to back it up and just plucking a figure out of the air, or you think, oh, that one up there got this, and I'm going to do that. That's not the way to do it. And if you're not familiar with how to do that and you're a self-managed landlord, speak to your local agent. I'm sure they'll be happy to help. I know I have done with several people. It needs to be a really data-driven decision, and that carries a lot more weight with it, and it looks well thought through when you could back up your decision to bring the rent to a certain level when you've got evidence to back that up in the local market from recent months. Don't pull things from 2 years ago. You're talking the last 6 months, 8 months max, I would say, probably. Even going back a year sometimes is a bit. You need to have some really on the recent months kind of comparables. That's what I would advise anyway. And if you're not sure how to do that, speak to your agent. I mean, Kerin, you've done quite a lot of reviews and things recently, and you'll probably had a lot of people come back to you and say, okay, where are we going to bring this rent review to then? What should we be doing? And obviously you need to back it up with comparables and evidence.
Yeah, you have to have your market knowledge. And again, there's no point in, even if your property is sitting quite a bit below market value and you're wanting to increase the rent, if you're doing a significant rent increase and you've got a good tenant, you could potentially be pushing them out the door or pushing them into financial difficulty. So it's best to do regular, small incremental increases. So you are progressively bringing your rent up over years, as opposed to not doing it for a while and then you're like, right, okay, I want an extra £100 a month. Like, your tenant's probably not going to be able to afford that. So, and it's a big cost as well. So doing these small incremental increases over years, as opposed to leaving it for a few years and then trying to increase the rent significantly, is what could lose you your tenant, especially if you have a good one. You don't want to be pushing them out.
No, because then, like we said at the beginning, you're going to have to then do that whole process again. You're going to have a void period, you're going to have remarketing costs, you're going to have referencing costs, which could then outweigh what your rent increase was even going to be for the next 12 months in comparison. So is it really worth it to do that? You need to, I mean, definitely on an individual basis, always review, but it could not be really worth your while to try and force that and then force the tenant out just to get the rent increase, especially if it's not a realistic one as well.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of a few properties from last year that were kind of reviewing the rents, and we've highlighted to the landlords, like, the market's not really changed, but if you do want to do an increase, we'd advise doing one of like maybe about £20-25. So again, it's just something to slowly creep it up, so that the tenant's probably not going to notice a significant amount of financial difference each month, but it still brings in a marginal increase for the landlord. However, quite a few of the landlords are quite happy with the way that the rents are because we have set them to market level. So they're quite happy not to review the rent this year. So again, it's taken into account what the market rent is and whether it's financially suitable to increase it for your tenant as well.
Yeah, and that's where, when you're doing relets or new lets, is aligning, having that price alignment to, a realistic market rent which is sustainable, and then that way you're already at a good starting point for, the market's going to change and things, but it's making sure you get that price point correct in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, rent increases weren't really a significant thing back then. So a lot of rents stayed the same for a long time because the market was fairly stable. Whereas obviously once we hit COVID and lockdown and everything just completely changed, and a lot more regulations have been coming in, focusing on that side of it as well. So it's something you have to pay a lot more attention to now than what you did previously.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's all about the communication. And if anybody, here in Scotland, familiar with the rent increase process, you need to communicate that very clearly in advance of actually implementing a rent increase. Your 3 months notice period has to be done, and that then obviously gets reviewed on an annual basis as well. So adding that letter in, which obviously advises them of the 3 months notice until the rent increase comes into play, it gives them the opportunity to communicate back to you, and then have them obviously agree to the actual rent increase themselves. And if they're not, they could have that conversation with you why, and that's when your evidence and things could come into play, where you could say, right, well, I'm bringing it to this level because these are the ones that are letting in the area. As if it is a significant jump, then they can obviously question that with Rent Service Scotland, of course. But another thing, not just comparable lets and what things are letting for in the area, other things that you could use to implement a rent increase is if you've put significant investment into the property. If you've just recently put in new heating systems, new windows, new kitchen, new bathroom, redecorated, and got the property up to a higher standard, then that could warrant possibly, obviously, a slighter increase in the rent. I had one recently where we had a sitting tenant, we sold it to a new landlord, and the rent wasn't low, but it wasn't as high as it could be for the area. And the new landlord didn't want to enforce a high rent increase on the tenant that was already in situ, she'd been there for a while, but he wanted to implement some sort of, increase in time. And she was quite happy with that, but she says, my boiler, it is a decent age, and it costs me a wee bit to run it because it's not as energy efficient as it used to be. And he says, that's fine, I'll put a new boiler in, and we'll do a rent increase further down the line. She was happy, he was happy. So she's getting a new heating system, he's getting a wee bit more rent further down the line, everyone's happy. And that's a good way to negotiate it as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's finding that balance.
Yeah, and then again, it's that long-lasting tenant. It comes from adopting that transparent and respectful approach, and that then justifies any increase you want to do, and then simultaneously really encourages a valued tenant, and they stay living at your property for longer. Everybody's happy. Tenant's happy, landlord's happy. Tenant has a nice, comfortable home that's got a good standard, and the landlord's got a really good investment. And that's all you could really, in an ideal world, that's all you could really ask for. So yeah, definitely have a robust rent review system in place, especially in today's climate, but be respectful about it and always do it correctly with evidence, and to back that up and do your due diligence, basically. So yeah, Kerin, we're going to move on. You're going to talk about high impact, low cost loyalty rewards. So what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so for outstanding tenants who pay on time, look after your property, and communicate well, and make good neighbours, because that's also a factor as well in this. Yeah. It is worth thinking about little ways to keep a hold of them. Good tenants, they can be quite hard to come by, so especially if you've got a really good one that's ticking all those boxes. Some small ideas include things like offering a property refresh, from giving the carpets a professional clean to repainting a small room, or cleaning up the grouting or tiles to bring them back to life. Just small things to keep the property fresh and keep the tenant happy.
Yeah, definitely.
Other things such as include a gardener's visit once or twice a year if your tenant isn't naturally green-fingered, or provide new planters to empty spaces like patios or balconies. a gardener can be a good one as well. Just if you've got quite mature shrubbery or a large garden, it can be beneficial. We do have properties that come with gardeners because they are very mature gardens, and a tenant probably wouldn't have the knowledge to deal with the plants that are there. So the gardeners do that, they come round, it's all included within the rent, so there's no discrepancies there, and the landlord has a peace of mind of knowing their lovely garden is staying that way, and the tenants know that they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, we do have a few of the bigger ones that have got gardeners in place, and they do need them. I mean, generally, you can't expect a tenant to be cutting down trees and big massive hedgerows and general weeding in the grass and things. Of course, that's a tenant's responsibility. I think there was one recently we were talking about, and we thought, that's going to need a gardener with it, I think.
Yeah, so there are some that need it, or even if you've got quite large hedges, for example, and maybe you've had some tenants over time and they've just grown and they've maybe not kept on top of them, it can be beneficial just to send a gardener around to get them cut back, and then at least it's a lot less of an expense then to do it, as opposed to when they get to the point where they are severely overgrown, they're maybe grown into cables as well, and then you need tree surgeons for it. Whereas if you just sent a gardener around maybe occasionally, even once a year, to trim back hedges, it keeps them maintained. And then obviously the tenants know that they're to keep on top of the garden, like the grass, weeding, things like that from there.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest one. You see hedges getting overgrown, and it's like, well, you could have had a few tenancies in over the length of time it's taken for it to grow that much. So it's like, who's responsible? So really, if the landlord gets the hedges done, it's probably the most sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, coming back to the topic of rent increases, proposing a rent increase slightly below the market maximum for a tenant who's been reliable for a long time, again, it's a nice wee sweetener there for them. A small gesture that's usually dwarfed by the cost of a void period. So again, if you're keeping the rent just slightly maybe below the market value as well, it shows them that you're being considerate. And again, if they moved out, you'd be spending a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I was saying about I think sometimes landlords that don't really realise that cost involved. If your tenant actually vacates, you're going to have possibility to touch up things. You have to remarket, you have to reference, you've got the period without rent until the next person comes in, and it could total up to quite a lot. And you could have maybe just done that maintenance issue, or maybe negotiated a slightly lower rent, but still kind of in line with the market and not too high. A sustainable rent, which works for both parties, I think.
And even if you've got the best of tenants who's looked after the property, when everything gets taken out of that house flat, for example, you're still going to have wear and tear on it, probably somewhere, whether it's scuffs on the walls or a wee mark on the carpet, or maybe the garden needs weeded. Just there's usually something.
People have to live in a property, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be. It's not good. Very rarely they're handed back immaculately and pristine the way that they were, especially if people have been in for a couple of years. There's going to be things.
Yeah, and most of the time you are having to go through a deposit claim for something, whether it be something small, like they've put the incorrect rubbish in the bins and they're going to have to be professionally emptied, or there's marks on the walls that are maybe exceeding wear and tear. There's usually something. Mm-hmm. Most of the time a tenant, despite you giving them a checklist to follow through and telling them what you expect at the end of the tenancy, most of the time they don't fulfill it fully. So there is usually that whole process to go through as well, and it's very lengthy to go through a deposit claim. So if you can avoid that by keeping a happy tenant, and it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, people panic about the whole exit and process and the deposit process and things. And I mean, like you say, 9 times out of 10, you usually are doing a deposit claim, but it's just for minor things, just to keep everybody happy. And usually the tenant's like, yeah, that's fine. If it's just a minimal, I know I left this, or this needs touched up, and they're quite happy, and as long as it's a transparent conversation, like these need to be rectified, that's fine, we'll deduct X amount to sort this, the landlord's happy. But if you've got an agent, they do all that for you, and it's not always like a big deposit claim with a lot of back and forward. It's usually just minor things.
Yeah, so in short, consider how you can cement the partnership to maintain a stable income stream from your tenant who's proved themselves to be a good tenant, and it gives you priceless peace of mind.
Yeah, I think the moral of that is, if you've got good tenants, look after them.
Yeah.
and in turn they'll give you a good investment. And it works. It's a two-way street, as I said earlier. But yeah, I think we'll round up with the question. I mean, long-lasting lettings really match in with your goal. And if you have several properties, then long-lasting lettings are definitely something that you're going to want to have. And we love to show people how to really cultivate that enduring tenancy and have landlords that maintain that good cash flow from that relationship, and it protects their investment and makes their lives as easy as possible, as well as the tenants. And it's all down to the way that your property is managed, and it could have a huge impact on the tenants you attract and how long they stay, and that all goes hand in hand with how you conduct yourself as an agent or as a landlord at the very beginning and throughout that tenancy as well, and that relationship you build with your tenants. So, I mean, hopefully we've covered quite a lot of points this morning, and I also put that link into setting up a tenancy correctly and all the pointers on that. So that's quite a good one to click through on. But of course, if you want to ask any questions, you could jump in the comments. You could message us direct. I think my direct email is on there. It's richard.cook@fiveproperties.co.uk. Any questions for me, feel free to come to me direct, or you could direct any questions to Kerin, and we will come back to you when we can. So that was good, Kerin. Thanks for running us through that today. That is really all about how to have that long-lasting letting and how to really cultivate a relationship with tenants for the long term. And hopefully we'll give you a lot of good pointers.
Yeah, some good tips in there.
Yeah. So that was great. Thanks for joining us. You could join us next time, and we will be covering another topic that hopefully will help you as a landlord, and of course tenants as well. So we'll leave it there today. Thanks for joining me, Kerin, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
No problem. See you later.